Your AC dies, the grid collapses, and within minutes your modern home turns into a 95-degree torture chamber. You panic, you sweat, you search for solutions you should have learned years ago. But here's the twist no one wants to admit. A medieval peasant would handle this heat better than you. Because while we depend on electricity like a life support machine, medieval people beat heat waves with zero power, zero machines, and zero excuses. Their homes cooled themselves. Their clothes acted like personal climate systems. Their cities functioned like giant passive air conditioners. And the most humiliating part, their technology still works. Ours fails the moment the outlet goes dark. Historians like to call the Middle Ages primitive. Yet the deeper we dig, the more embarrassing the truth becomes. They engineered naturally regulated environments centuries before we invented air conditioning. And we've forgotten almost all of it. This isn't nostalgia, it's a warning. Because heat waves are getting deadlier, blackouts are becoming routine, and the knowledge that kept millions alive for 1,000 years might be the only thing standing between you and a summer disaster. The question isn't, were medieval people smart? The question is, are we dumb enough to ignore what they already perfected? When you picture a medieval castle, you see warriors, battlements, and stone walls built to withstand sieges. What you probably don't realize is that those same walls were also outperforming your modern air conditioner. While today's homes trap heat like a poorly designed oven, medieval builders were crafting full-scale passive cooling machines, centuries before anyone put equations to thermal mass. Let's start with the thing medieval masons understood better than most modern architects. Stone isn't just a building material, it's a climate system. 6 feet of limestone doesn't simply exist between inside and outside temperatures, it works. During the hottest hours of the day, the stone absorbs massive amounts of heat, pulling it away from interior spaces. When night falls and temperatures drop, the stone releases that stored warmth outward, not inward. This slow inhale-exhale cycle kept medieval interiors cool even in scorching summers. Your drywall? It heats up fast, cools down fast, and does absolutely nothing to help you survive a blackout. But medieval masons weren't picking stone randomly. Archaeological surveys show they selected limestone and sandstone with specific porosity, functioning like natural thermal batteries. The microscopic air pockets inside the stone created insulation far superior to the synthetic materials we rely on today. And unlike foam insulation that degrades in 20-30 years, medieval stone walls still perform flawlessly after 800. And then there were the cooling corners. Medieval homes were designed with intersecting stone walls that created pockets of naturally colder air. These weren't architectural accidents, they were intentional climate zones. Families moved their daily activities through the house as the sun shifted, following these microclimates like a natural rhythm. They didn't fight the heat, they cooperated with the building. Modern architects package this same principle as premium eco-design and charge a fortune for it. Medieval masons, they considered it basic common sense. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Medieval builders created homes that cooled themselves. You live in a house that collapses the moment the power does. So ask yourself, who really understood comfort? The medieval mason with a hammer and stone? Or the modern homeowner whose survival depends entirely on a machine plugged into a fragile electrical grid? Maybe the greatest cooling technology isn't new at all. Maybe it's buried in walls built 1,000 years ago. Your freezer dies during a blackout and suddenly you panic about melting ice cream. But medieval Persian engineers? They made ice in the middle of a 110-degree desert and preserved it all summer, using nothing but wind, geometry, and gravity. No motors, No electricity, no refrigerants, just raw brilliance. Their secret wasn't one invention. It was an entire integrated cooling ecosystem. And if you lived in ancient Persia, this system was your everyday reality, not a miracle. Start with the badgir, or wind catcher. These towering structures captured the slightest breeze, funneled it downward through narrow ventilation shafts, and forced the hot desert air to pass over subterranean canals called qanats. Qanats carried meltwater from distant mountains, staying naturally cold because they flowed deep underground. As the super hot air met the frigid water, something incredible happened. It dropped in temperature instantly. That cooled air was then directed into massive domed ice houses known as yakchals, engineering masterpieces made of heat-resistant clay, sand, and ash. Their thick walls acted like colossal thermal batteries, keeping the interior cold enough to store winter ice until the hottest days of summer. In other words, this wasn't survival. This was air conditioning before air conditioning existed. Entire neighborhoods in cities like Yazd stayed cool because of this system. Streets were shaded and ventilated by wind catcher networks. Homes used the cooled airflow to drop interior temperatures dramatically. Modern engineers still study these structures, trying to recreate the physics, often with worse results despite having computers, sensors, and simulations. And the elegance? The entire system had 0 moving parts. No compressors to fail, no motors to burn out. Nothing to maintain. It simply worked, day after day, season after season, century after century. Today, architects plaster the label "sustainable design" onto expensive buildings that barely touch the efficiency of a yakchal. But medieval Persians perfected low-energy cooling before sustainability was even a word. So, ask yourself, if you were stranded in a desert heatwave with no electricity, would you trust a modern home full of machines that break, or a 1,500-year-old structure that keeps ice frozen under the summer sun? One of those systems was built to last, the other was built to sell. Your refrigerator needs electricity, refrigerant, coils, compressors, and constant maintenance. Medieval people, they cooled food and water with a piece of clay, and in many cases did it more efficiently than your modern appliances. Let that sink in. Across medieval Spain and the Islamic world, unglazed ceramic vessels like the botijo and alcareza weren't designed as simple water jugs. They were precision-engineered cooling devices based on evaporative physics, long before anyone understood thermodynamics on paper. The genius was in the clay itself, porous, carefully selected, and fired at just the right temperature to allow microscopic water seepage to the outer surface. As that water evaporated, it stole heat from the jug, dropping internal temperatures by as much as 20 degrees. No electricity, no moving parts, no failure point. Your modern plastic evaporative coolers? They clog, crack, break, and end up in a landfill. But these medieval ceramic coolers worked for decades, sometimes generations. And medieval people didn't just cool their drinks. They built entire cooling zones in their homes, recessed wall niches filled with porous vessels that turned a corner of the house into a natural refrigerator. Hot, dry air passed over the wet clay, evaporated moisture, and produced a constant flow of chilled air. Medieval families didn't fear heat waves. They engineered their way through them with clay and airflow alone. The wild part? Modern designers are now reinventing porous cooling ceramics and selling them as luxury eco-products. Meanwhile, a medieval potter could have shown them the blueprint in 30 seconds. So the next time your fridge stops working during a blackout, remember, a medieval water jug could keep your food cooler, longer, because unlike us, they built technology that didn't need a plug to stay useful. You toss and turn in summer heat, blaming your mattress, your AC, your partner, your hormones, everything except the real issue. You have no idea how to sleep in hot weather without electricity. Medieval people did, and their nighttime cooling system puts your cooling mattress topper to shame. First, they didn't trap themselves in the hottest part of the house like we do. Medieval families migrated downward every summer, sleeping on the lowest level, what we now call the basement, where ground temperature stays 10-15 degrees cooler. No fan needed, just physics. Their beds weren't fluffy heat traps either. They used woven reed mats elevated on wooden frames, allowing air to move beneath the sleeper. A detail modern cooling experts now insist on, but medieval commoners already knew. In Mediterranean homes, they even positioned beds exactly 12 to 18 inches above the floor, the coolest layer of air in the room. That's natural climate science without a degree. But here comes the shocking part. Medieval people invented the cooling sheet centuries before we did. A linen cloth soaked in water, wrung out to be barely damp, then laid over the sleeper. As the water evaporated slowly through the night, it wicked heat away from the body like a full-body AC system powered entirely by thermodynamics. No mold, no discomfort. Just hours of cool, steady relief. They even mastered ventilation timing, opening windows at night to release trapped heat and closing them early in the morning before the sun warmed the walls. Meanwhile, you probably open your windows at the exact wrong time, trapping heat instead of releasing it. Their cooling pillow? Not memory foam, buckwheat holes that dissipate heat naturally instead of storing it like a sponge. Medieval sleep wasn't primitive. It was environmental engineering optimized over centuries. While you're sweating under a high-tech blanket wondering why summer nights feel impossible, your refrigerator dies and suddenly you're in crisis mode, terrified your food will spoil in hours. Medieval people? They kept food cold for months in the middle of summer, without electricity, refrigerants, or compressors. And their solution wasn't magic. It was engineering brilliance buried right beneath their feet. The medieval cool chamber wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was a climate-controlled survival machine. Temperatures inside stayed between 45 and 55 degrees all year long, regardless of whether it was 60 degrees or 110 degrees outside. That's more stable than many modern refrigerators during power fluctuations. How did they do it? They designed double wall structures with built-in air channels that created continuous airflow. Fresh air entered through narrow shafts, often passing over underground water features that pre-cooled it through natural evaporation. This wasn't passive storage. It was a microclimate factory. The most advanced versions included cold wells, vertical shafts dug deeper than the chamber itself. Since cold air sinks, these shafts acted like gravity-fed freezers. Foods requiring lower temperatures were lowered into these wells using rope and pulley systems. No electricity, no noise, no failure points. And here's the detail modern people always overlook. These systems weren't just for wealthy estates. Archaeological digs show that even modest medieval homes incorporated versions of cold chambers because food preservation was life-or-death knowledge, not a luxury. Monastery records reveal something even more impressive. Over an entire year, temperatures inside these chambers varied by as little as 8 degrees. Modern fridges can't maintain that consistency during grid instability. Medieval cold storage wasn't primitive survivalism. It was precision environmental control, achieved with stone, wood, air, and water. So when your fridge stops running and panic sets in, remember this. The medieval world had already solved that problem, and their solution still works, silently, flawlessly, and forever. You think Gatorade keeps you cool? Medieval monks were formulating cooling hydration systems centuries before the first plastic bottle existed. And the scary part is, their formulas often worked better than today's electrolyte drinks. Their secret weapon was oxymel, a precise blend of water, honey, and vinegar. Not a sweet drink, not a comfort drink. A functional cooling solution designed to trigger vasodilation, widening blood vessels near the skin so the body could dump heat faster. Modern sports science praises this mechanism. Medieval medicine was already exploiting it. Mediterranean versions evolved even further. They added mint, melissa, and rosemary, not for flavor, but for their thermogenic regulation properties. Herbs that modern pharmacology confirms improve perspiration efficiency and circulation. Meanwhile, Northern Europeans crafted variants using elderflower and linden, plants now known for enhancing microcapillary flow and heat dissipation. Still think medieval people were guessing? Then look at medieval Persia's sekajabin, a sophisticated electrolyte system created long before electrolytes had a name. They added cucumbers, mineral salts, and cooling herbs, and field workers drank it preventatively, understanding that hydration wasn't about quenching thirst, but about maintaining internal cooling capacity during heat exposure. And here's the punchline. Modern workers still suffer heat stroke. Medieval field laborers, soldiers, and craftsmen, performing hard labor in brutal climates, built an entire cooling culture around beverages that science is only now validating. Medieval hospitals even prescribed these drinks on strict schedules depending on profession and heat level, a form of personalized hydration that would make today's wellness influencers look clueless. So, the next time you reach for a neon blue sports drink thinking you're technologically advanced, remember, a medieval monk with a clay cup and a garden full of herbs was cooling his body with more intelligence and better chemistry than most of us do today. Your moisture-wicking athletic shirt costs $50, lasts a year, and barely keeps you cool. Medieval people wore clothes that lasted decades and cooled their bodies better than most advanced fabrics today. No synthetics, no tech, just pure material science hidden in plain sight. The foundation of their cooling system was linen, not because it was trendy, but because its hollow fiber structure pulls moisture away from the skin faster than cotton and far faster than polyester. Medieval tailors didn't know the chemical diagrams, but they knew the effect. Linen keeps you cool even in scorching heat, never clings to sweat, and dries almost instantly. That alone outperforms half the modern athletic industry. But the real genius was in layering physics. Medieval summer clothing wasn't just lighter winter clothes. It was a multi-layer microclimate system. Light-colored outer layers reflected radiant heat, while the inner layers created air gaps. Insulation not to retain warmth, but to block external heat from reaching the skin. It's the same principle used in Bedouin desert wear and elite modern outdoor gear. Except medieval people perfected it centuries earlier. They even engineered airflow into movement. The pleating patterns on outer garments weren't decorative. They acted like tiny bellows, pumping fresh air across the body with every step. Strategic openings around the neck, back, and arms directed airflow exactly where sweat evaporates fastest. And here's something modern dermatology finds embarrassing. Medieval woad-dyed linens naturally blocked up to 85% of UV radiation. That means medieval peasants walked around with fabric equivalent to SPF 15 sunscreen woven into their everyday clothes, long before anyone knew what UV even was. Your high-tech wardrobe? It depends entirely on marketing. Theirs depended on understanding nature. So when the next heat wave hits and your synthetic shirt starts feeling like a hot plastic bag, remember, a medieval outfit made from simple flax fibers might keep you cooler than anything hanging in your closet right now. Your eco-friendly green roof is just medieval technology with a marketing department. Long before sustainability became a trend, medieval people engineered entire cooling systems using nothing but plants, shadows, and evaporating water. And these systems were so effective that modern architects still struggle to match them. Start with the Mediterranean courtyard. It wasn't a pretty garden. It was a temperature-regulating engine. The high walls blocked sunlight, the stone reflected heat upward, and the plants inside acted like natural evaporative coolers. Climbing vines on south-facing walls dropped surface temperatures by as much as 30 degrees, something no modern window film can replicate. And medieval gardeners weren't just planting randomly. They selected species based on evapotranspiration rates, how much water the plant releases through its leaves. A mature grapevine can transpire up to 5 gallons of water per day, essentially creating its own cooling mist that lowered the air temperature all around it. That's a natural AC running without electricity, maintenance, or noise. Monasteries took it even further. They designed cooling corridors, narrow pathways aligned with prevailing winds and shaded by carefully positioned trees. As air moved through these living tunnels, the leaves cooled it through evaporation, creating breezeways so refreshingly cold that travelers described them as walking into another season. And the sophistication gets deeper. Medieval planners used deciduous plants intentionally. Leaves would provide maximum shade in summer but fall away in winter, allowing warm sunlight to reach walls and interior spaces. That's seasonal thermal programming, achieved with trees, not computers. Even fruit placement mattered. High-water fruits like figs, grapes, and pomegranates were grown against sun-exposed walls to absorb solar radiation and convert it into growth instead of interior heat. We bulldozed these living cooling systems for clean lines and low maintenance. Then we spent billions inventing mechanical replacements that do the same job, worse. Sometimes progress isn't about building new machines. It's about admitting the forest already solved the problem. You try to fight the heat. Medieval people scheduled their entire lives around defeating it, and they barely broke a sweat. Their greatest cooling technology wasn't made of stone, clay, or plants. It was time itself. In the modern world, we push through the hottest hours of the day like nothing's wrong. Productivity drops, AC bills skyrocket, and our bodies pay the price. Medieval life operated on an entirely different logic, a climate-intelligent rhythm refined over centuries. They started with dawn shifts. Work began at the coolest moment of the day, not because of religious devotion, but because temperatures were lowest. While you're still hitting snooze, medieval people were already maximizing their most comfortable window. Then came the move modern critics label lazy, the midday halt. But this wasn't laziness, it was science. Human productivity tanks in high heat. So medieval workers paused during peak temperatures, conserving energy and avoiding heat stroke, while modern offices blast AC to force bodies past their limits. Cooking followed strict thermal logic too. All baking and hearthwork happened before sunrise, so homes wouldn't heat up from indoor fires. Multiple families shared communal ovens on precise schedules to minimize total heat in living spaces, something modern kitchens absolutely fail at. Even sleep was optimized. Medieval people practiced a biphasic sleep cycle. A first sleep at dusk, a waking period at midnight, when temperatures dropped, then a second sleep until dawn. It wasn't insomnia, it was a thermal strategy that kept bodies aligned with natural cooling. Community life shifted as well. Market days moved earlier in summer and later in winter. Public gatherings migrated to riversides or shaded squares. And inside homes, families migrated vertically. Top floors in winter for warmth, bottom floors in summer for cooling. They didn't fight the weather, they flowed with it. and built a society that stayed cool long before AC existed. Meanwhile, modern people schedule outdoor weddings in July and act surprised when everyone faints. You rely on a weather app that still gets the forecast wrong half the time. Medieval people predicted heat waves with no satellites, no radar, no meteorologists, and sometimes their predictions were more accurate. Why? Because they weren't staring at screens. They were observing the world. Medieval communities developed a sophisticated system of barometric indicators long before barometers existed. Pine cones that opened wider signaled dropping humidity. Seaweed hung by the doorway stiffened or softened depending on atmospheric pressure. Even joint pain in elders served as an early warning system, because inflammation responds to pressure changes. Today, we call that folklore. Back then, it was climate science in human form, but prediction was only half the magic. What made medieval cooling brilliant was the preventative system that followed. When signs pointed toward rising heat, families immediately implemented cooling strategies. Closing shutters at dawn to trap the night's cool air, soaking linens and storing them for later evaporation, moving food deeper into cold wells, shifting work schedules hours before heat arrived, increasing consumption of cooling herbs and hydration tonics. This wasn't improvisation. It was a codified generational protocol, a heat wave playbook passed from parent to child. Cities adjusted too. Markets changed locations. Public events relocated to riversides or shaded squares. Fields that required heavy labor were abandoned until temperatures stabilized. Whole communities shifted rhythm in anticipation of heat, not in reaction to it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Modern people get heat stroke with all their technology. Medieval people, living without power, had fewer heat-related deaths in many regions because they respected environmental signals we now ignore. They didn't wait for the heat to destroy them. They outsmarted it days in advance. So, when your weather app sends a heat advisory notification and you start to panic, remember, a medieval villager with a pine cone, a garden of herbs, and the wisdom to pay attention was often better prepared than someone with a smartphone and central air. So now you've seen it. 10 medieval cooling systems that worked without electricity, without machinery, without the fragile comfort we depend on today. And here's the part no one wants to admit. The Middle Ages weren't primitive. We're the ones who became fragile. We built a world where survival depends on plugged-in machines. And the second those machines fail, we fail with them. Medieval people didn't have the luxury of waste. They didn't have the safety net of air conditioning, refrigerators, purified water, or climate-controlled buildings. So they innovated in the only direction that truly matters, toward resilience. Every stone wall, every clay vessel, every sleeping ritual, every courtyard, every herb, every schedule. They all existed because someone, somewhere, needed to survive one more summer. They didn't wait for technology to save them. They studied wind, they studied shade, they studied the earth beneath their feet and the sky above their heads. And what they built wasn't just functional, it was brilliant. And now, blackouts are becoming normal. Heat waves are getting deadlier. The systems we depend on are cracking under pressure. Maybe the question we should be asking isn't, how did medieval people survive without AC? It's, how long can we survive without it? Because when the grid collapses and the temperature spikes, survival won't belong to the one with the most expensive gadgets, but to the one who remembers the old ways, the natural ways, the forgotten ways. Medieval people weren't relics of the past. They were masters of adaptation. And maybe, just maybe, real progress isn't inventing new dependencies, but rediscovering what they already knew.